Good morning and welcome to Fox 32 Sunday. I'm political editor Mike Flannery. We hear an awful lot about school reform from politicians, from unions, and from what is becoming a whole industry seemingly based on school reform. But we don't often hear so much, publicly at least, from people who actually run and administer our neighborhood public schools. This morning, we're going to change that. The group Vision 2020 represents principals, superintendents, and elected school boards, as well as a few others, business managers in particular. This group has just released a report detailing what those experts say should be done to improve Illinois' public schools. Two of the leaders of Vision 2020 are joining us. Roger Eddy, a former Illinois state representative, now executive director of the Illinois Association of School Boards. Brent Clark is executive director of the Illinois Association of School Administrators. What's the headline on your finding here, Roger?
Well, I think a headline is the fact that we have gotten together and we're talking about what we think should happen in public education.
Now, you want more money?
Well, we want to see that
that's
the money
what the taxpayers out there are going to note.
Well, we certainly think enhanced funding for education is an important part of this, but only after we do a study to find out what works and do an outcomes evidence-based look at educating children.
All right. So, are there three things, Brent, that you'd want people to take away this morning from this? What are the if you got these tens of millions, hundreds of millions of additional dollars, what are the three top things you do with it?
Well, I think the neat thing about this plan is that everything in the plan doesn't necessarily cost money. We've got some items in there that would be low cost or no cost, and we think we can implement some of those early on in the process.
But with the money, what would you do?
Well, the money,
we're going to talk about some of that. I mean, for example, getting rid of some of the idiotic mandates that the state puts on you. But let's talk right now about some specific things you do. In Chicago, in troubled schools, we've heard a lot about tutoring. The mayor has raised private money. He's put some taxpayer money into it. Even in Englewood, even in some of the most violent, gang-ridden neighborhoods, there are some eye-popping success stories. Is that the kind of thing you would do in tough schools downstate?
Well, I think what you're seeing downstate is over the last 4 or 5 years, you've seen massive reductions in programs and personnel. So I think why? Because there's been a reduction of state support through the general state aid formula for those schools. They've cut people, they've cut programs, and I think if there was more money in this plan, eventually you'd see them add back that type of extracurricular activity, such as music and art, the creative things that really build passion in children.
Now, Roger, you guys talk in here about how important it is to educate the whole child. That music and art, in fact, are not just niceties. They should be part of helping somebody grow and become an adult.
Absolutely. The social and emotional development of a child, along with finding out what makes that child successful and really passionate about education, is important. And not all children are the same. Our children are more than how they do on a test one day of the year. So we think we really have to pay attention to developing the whole child, and then continue, obviously, to improve what we do with reading and math and make sure that that's on the table. But we don't want a narrowing of the curriculum or narrowing of the focus to the point that we're not really educating the whole child.
All right, so you did send out questionnaires to 75% schools, school districts, and 75% of the state. And you actually sent them to the whole state, but you got 75% back. And what is the biggest difference between Chicago and the other schools in the rest of the state?
Well, I think there's a variety of things, but at the end of the day, there's more commonalities than there are differences, and that is that we've got school systems trying to take every child that shows up at that door and turn out the best eventual citizen in our economy, in our society that we can.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about some of the mandates you'd like to get rid of. One of the things that infuriates school administrators, and I remember going out and talking to people in Elgin and out in the western suburbs in Northbrook, some of the places where they're spending over $20,000 per student and places where they spend barely $6,000 or $7,000 per student. They hate the mandates. Why?
Well, first, if it's mandated, you can almost bet it's going to cost more, because you have to purchase it. That's number one. The other thing is,
one of the most expensive mandates is driver's ed.
And it takes away local discretion as to if that's the best use of resources in that school district. For example, physical education is another one. No one wants to see children be obese, but at the same time, districts don't have the flexibility to keep a kindergarten teacher or keep their class sizes lower at the elementary level. they have to keep a high school PE teacher, maybe there's another way they can deliver physical education and not have to lay off 3 or 4 elementary teachers raising their class size. And that's just an example. I mean, the local control and flexibility that locally elected boards should have to make the best decisions they can for the children in their community is often stifled by these unfunded mandates.
Brent, my favorite of the mandates is Leif Erikson Day. There actually is a state law passed by the General Assembly requiring that on a certain day each year, every school has to spend at least some time talking about the legacy of Leif Erikson the Viking. Now, is that being done in every school you know of?
I could not comment on that. I'm not there on Leif Erikson Day to actually check on that.
Is that appropriate? Is that the kind of thing? I mean, it's part of that ethnic thing that has taken place. You have a bunch of different ethnic days. Is that an efficient use of teacher time and student time?
Well, I think you've got people that come and pass these mandates. They're good ideas generally, and they mean well when they do that. But over the course of time, we've just seen a mountain of mandates to the point that it's now become a major issue to try to deal with all the variety of mandates and the cost and the time associated with those. And we'd like to see some discretion given to local school districts to kind of sort that out. What works best locally?
We have about 90 seconds left, guys. So let me ask you, Brent, and then you, Roger. You talk about adequate funding. You want to have fair funding, but adequate funding. Where does the new money come from, especially when Governor-elect Rauner has promised to cut the state income tax by $4 billion a year?
Well, on the funding model that we are suggesting be looked at, this evidence-based funding model, it's a scalable model. It's the elements of the model are things that you can pick and choose in terms of the services that you want to provide in a school district. So you may want to look at that model as a way to ramp this into the school systems over time. So you may not get to the end point the first year you implement that model, but you could say, hey, over the next 5 or 6 years, we're going to march this in
You're a former member of the General Assembly, Roger. 30 seconds. Where would the money come from?
Well, obviously,
the income tax, the new sales tax?
Well, those are issues that they're wrestling with, but I think just the idea that we can have growth in the economy and make sure that growth that is natural with a better maybe business climate or a better jobs climate will help us produce revenue that can be dedicated to education. I think the idea that we're going to pass a whole bunch of new revenue bills is a difficult thing, but I think there are places to look at to make sure education is a priority with new dollars.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you very much. And the report of your group, Vision 2020, they can find it on the internet where?
Vision2020.org.
IllinoisVision2020.org.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And when we come back, we will continue. This is Fox 32 Sunday.